Please welcome Jon.
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, so while I'm waiting for this to warm up, this is, Barry's stuff there about USQ is a brilliant example of an organisation trying to adapt, be resilient, survive, and so on. It's speculating, it's experimenting, it's doing, trying to do its thing. So what I want to do is, So what I want to do is we've got an automatic clicker here, but does this thing work?
Sure.
Hold on. Yeah, okay. Alright, so let me tell you a little bit about what I think is the modern resilient organisation. The reason well done, Barry. I'll cut that bit out. So the reason I wanted to talk about the modern resilient organisation is to try and frame almost everything we do in the business school into one piece. Okay. So first of all, when I say resilience, what do you think of? Give me an image that you think of. Resilience. What do you think? Strong. Esteemed. Sustainable. Sporty. Oh yeah, okay, Nike did a good job there.
Bounces back.
Yeah, bounces back. Plastic, elastic.
Fantastic.
So look, what I think is going on is, and this is, I suppose, an overview of my presentation here, is that there is a social revolution happening inside organisations. It is the long tail of something which happened in the Industrial Revolution, the form of the British Empire, results in democracy in the United Kingdom, then the United States, then Europe. And for years we've been coming from outside there in a democratic environment into an autocracy, into an autocratic environment in the organisation. And now, because of technology, and because of some other thinking devices like projects, conceptualizing work in terms of projects, I think what we are seeing is a democratization of the organizational environment. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you a little bit back through time, and the reason I think this is happening in this way, as I said, there's some thinking tools that are useful. What's happening in organizations is that power is shifting. Power is shifting from the top, and it is shifting down through the organization into things like projects. All right. So here is the front line, the business front line. This is the production environment. Here's the corporate management. Here's operational business. This is our production line. This is, if you looked at USQ, at the university, this is our teaching business. It's a production line that we've got. But in order to compete on this business front line, we need to somehow adapt. So we need to look at new markets. We also need to improve processes. So we will have a range of projects on the go. That's what we call them. These are the bits of work, tinkering around, which will go back. Some of these projects will be in optimizing our production line. So we'll have initiatives that look perhaps at our teaching programs and how we can improve those. Other projects will perhaps look at new business. So you can almost characterize all organizations in these sort of terms. There will be a product or service that they deliver, plus there will be some range of project work that's going on that's looking at improving how they deliver that product or service, or looking at new markets. And this is how it tries to stay ahead of the game. This is how it competes with other businesses. Now, what I want to take you to is this little diagram here. This is a drawing in 1876. This is called the British Beehive. This is a sketch done about the British Empire and how it works. Now, what I want to tell you is that it's misread, and most people that look at it misread it, because it looks as though we've got the monarchy at the top and everybody else all at the bottom all survived because of the monarchy. Well, that's what you would have got if you went into France in the 1800s and the 1700s. But that's not what you had when you went into the United Kingdom. That's a constitutional monarchy. It's there by contract. And a nice little device, which I'll tell you about in a second, back in the 1200s, set about setting this system up. And the way that this works is not that this is in any way in charge of this. But what this does is it offers a framework for all this to exist. Without the framework, it doesn't work. You need a governance structure. If you don't like the governance structure, you can go and get rid of it. And they did, of course, a few times. But what you have here is you have a whole system in the middle here of associations. If you went over to France, what you would see is you would see the individual and the monarchy. In the British Empire, you saw associations here. If you're an individual, you can't take on the state. But if you're an association of people and you're allowed to associate, you have that freedom to do it, then you can start to orchestrate a governance structure. Now this basically, I'm going to return to this diagram and I'm going to redraw it for the modern organisation, because it's working in the same way. It's going this direction. So, let me just pull back on my little timeline for a second. And I'm going to take us down to the past, because I want to talk about governance first, where the idea and the concept comes from. And there's some little tricks that were invented at the time as well. They weren't invented deliberately because of this, they just worked out to be useful. If you go back to, and of course we often talk about the Industrial Revolution as being up here in the 1700s and 1800s, but actually if you went back down to 1086 and looked at the Doomsday Book, you'd see that Britain's a great Galapagos island. It's cut off by sea, right? And it's got lots of rivers that go inland. So you've got almost like a transport system. It's a great environment to set this up. One of the things you find when you look in the Doomsday Book is that they were wheels, there were mills, there were factories, there was non-human labour happening. People weren't in the fields picking stuff out themselves. They had horses. They were breeding horses, Shire horses that were going on. Another little trick that came along is they had problems. When you were sending people off to the Crusades, and you sort of say, well, yeah, look, mate, will you look after my land until I come back? And of course there were problems, and when you came back, you said, well, can I have my land back? They said, no, it's mine. So there were all these sort of problems that went on with about ownership, equity. And this was a big thing in the law in the 17 and 1800s. But this idea of trust. Now this idea of trust about setting up this non-human thing, this entity, this corporation which it becomes, and this is the concept which later mutates in the 1800s into the thing we now know as the corporation, or the company. So this nice little device that was set up, a legal device that was set up. Another little thing that helped with governance, and again, I'll show you how this happens in the organisation. Another thing that happens is, we had all the barons around at the time, they all wanted to be king, they were all fighting to be king. Because king, the monarchy, has this ultimate power. Now if you remove the thing that has this ultimate power, so you have this little device here that you remove, so you have nothing to fight about, but you still need the monarchy. For me to be a baron, and for you to be barons, I still need a monarchy to be a baron in, right? I cannot be one without one. But we don't want to be fighting over this monarchy, because this one has all this power. So basically we get together and we say, now you no longer have the powers you thought you have. We'll take them off you. You can agree to that, or not, as the case may be. But this is what happened. So powers were taken from the monarchy. So if you were to look at the Magna Carta, or what it is, it's a whole list of things that the king can and cannot do. Now when you've got no entity to fight over, we don't want to fight now to be the king, because the king has limited powers. But we still retain a structure that enables us to govern our environment. Okay? You can't just have freeness, everybody running all over the place. You need a structure of some form. So these devices, long way back, plus there are all these market networks going on. So, and another thing I want to tap into in a little while, when we look at the modern organisation, of how we've got this network that's going on. But we've done it before. We've done it before. If you looked at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, and they showed you just before the start, this is a clip from it, if you just look before the start of the Industrial Revolution, this is what it's like. It's farmland, but there were machines, and there was non-human labour going on there. And there was markets of people contributing to other people. Sharing labour, division of labour going on. Okay. So we come along to the invention of the factory. And this is where the start of the modern, what we've got as the modern organisation comes from. Mining takes off in this era. People have been mining for a long time before then, but now they've used up all the coal reserves on the beaches at low levels. Now they start digging deep holes. Coming out of this, as this starts to take off, the factory, where is it? The factory is stuck by the river. There it is. We need it because that's where our power source is. Still, there's big water wheels here running this sort of stuff. But as we dig up coal, as we start producing engines, we now free up the factory. The factory can now leave the rivers. You know, you take it along to the future now, where we've got factories that are completely mobile. Our production environments, and we can pick them up and move them around the world. But this is the start of breaking production away from its environment. We can start to put it in different places. People like Adam Smith and Thomas Malthus. We were listening to talks on carbon stuff this morning. I don't know if anybody else was there with me. But we were talking about how companies now are operating. One of the pressures is, of course, to show that you're offsetting carbon by planting trees and so forth. But you know, these people were worried at the time of what was the future of the world if we are growing in number, yet we have no possibility of being able to feed them. One of the things that we got from the carbon talk this morning is everybody's planting trees everywhere. And then the next talk from somebody else was talking about, well, where are we planting the trees? Well, we're actually taking all the small countries and planting them full of trees. Well, they don't want that for a start. So there's all this pressure that's exerted on organisations as they are developing, but they're right back here. They're not just modern pressures that they're facing. The modern organisation is developing in such a way that it is resilient in the fact that it's constantly adapting and changing all the time. Just as much as a biological species adapts and changes, so does an organisation. So then we come through in the 1800s. Things really take off. So now we have rail, and we've got people connecting factories up around, connecting organisations up around the country. We've got an industrialised environment. We basically turned Britain into an engine, into a machine. It's a factory. The whole country is a factory. But interestingly enough, people were thinking about not only just the factory, but they were also thinking about people and work. One of this little gadget here, it's called the harmonogram. And the intention of it was to bring harmony to work. It's the forerunner of the Gantt chart that we use in project management. But it was called, it had harmony in its name. The intention of trying to make work more palatable to humans, of course, but actually more efficient as well. Other great things that were coming along at the time. So we were thinking about being fit. With Charles Darwin and his Origin of the Species, you know, we need a fit. Somebody mentioned fitness and fit for purpose in an organisation. Of course, people misunderstood really what he meant, I believe. Then you have Karl Marx, who was looking at capital and sort of saying, well, we are turning this place into a factory. What about the people? What about the individual rights of the people? He foreshadowed all the crash that we had. This is a crooked little talk here. Look, this is his idea. He reckons there's a problem, right? And there's this massive crisis coming in capital. And then here's the length of the day. Here's the length of the working day. This is the worker working here, and this is how much time it takes for the worker to put value back into the business that you're going to pay him in his wages. So this is how long the worker takes to earn the value in the business for his pay. But that's not when he finishes work. He finishes work here. So all that part that he works is extra value. That's where the idea of, that's where profit comes from. Right? So Marx, of course, would say that you're stealing that. You're stealing that value back. But he said there's a problem in this. And if you are to be like, and of course he was inspired by Charles Darwin and the idea of adaptation and evolution. If you are to compete in the marketplace, you as a business, what you need to do is you need to take some of that money that you're earning there and you need to put it back into the business. You need to put it back into machinery, equipment, raw materials and so forth. But there's a problem here, and that is what Marx is pointing out, is it's the human that generates the value, not the machine. The machine just sits there. You need a human to interact with it and do something, create value. So he said there was a problem happening. He said we keep throwing all this money back in. This is how he reinvests, by producing more, buying more equipment, materials and so forth. What you can do in order to improve this is improve how much bang for the buck you're getting out of the human. You need to look at how humans are working, because they're working really inefficiently. And this is then the start of the production line. So now we move into the 1900s, and we get people like Frederick Taylor, the father of sort of scientific thinking, if you like. And he picks up exactly on Marx's point. And the intention there is to, I mean, it's lovely. If you ever actually get to read, lots of business academics talk about the scientific management book, but never actually read it. But it's a brilliant book to read, because it's nothing like you think it is. One of the things is he has a go, really. He talks about the Englishman and the American person and how they spend all their efforts at sport and at play. And then when they come to work, they slack as anything. He calls it soldiering. They spend about 10% of their time in work and effort. And he also then says, well, the reason they do this is because the employer is ignorant. The employer is ignorant of how much, what it takes to do that work. They're just letting the worker, the power is with the worker doing these things. And what we need to do is we need to find out how much we need to study. We need to study how to improve work. And that's precisely what he does. Let me just go back to it. Yeah. So this is precisely what he does. And he starts these motion studies. He is the man with the stopwatch behind people on conveyor belts, watching how long it takes. There's a fantastic movie that General Motors put out in the 1930s, which is to try and educate the public about motion studies. You'd love it if you watched it. I might send the link around. Basically, it starts off with a husband and wife laying on the table. You can imagine the sexism in this video, right? You know, back in the 1930s, this is when it is set. And she's laying at the table, and the husband says, "You're doing that really inefficiently, you know. There is a better way. If you do the motion studies, and let's conduct a motion study, you could do this much better, right?" Anyway, so what happens is you have this whole new class of people, because from his point of view, you see, all this workforce that's going on here, it needs to be managed. You need to select the right people, the right processes, and this is what management is for. This is why you see a huge build-up in the management classes. Their role is to sort this lot out. Okay, so let me just skip. 1960s, we have the whole sort of lean production, Toyota manufacturing, people in Agile, in project management now use these terms as if they're modern and they're new, but they were all back in the 1960s. Toyota were doing it first. Then it was all about teams, teamwork, all bonding together as teams. We had the personal computer coming out, and then we had the internet and bits of software that help people manage production and so forth. But the interesting thing that happens here is now you've got information flooding around the work environment. This is the start, I think, of this revolution happening inside the business. Whereas before I've talked a little bit about coming through, affecting a whole country, and then a continent, and then the Western world. Now it's starting to happen inside the business. Because we've got a lot of information flying around, and with information there's power with it. If you hold information, you have power. So this really gets to the idea of governance, because what you've got is you've got this company, the company there, it's firing off and it's doing its thing. And if you went back into the 1900s, you'd find out that information was flowing around there by letter, by conversation, and so forth. Now you move up into the 80s and the 90s, information is flowing around electronically, and it's firing off all over the place. People are getting blind copied, CC copied, all sorts of stuff. Stuff just flies out everywhere. And in order to be able to manage this environment, there needs to be some sort of governance rules set up. Then when we come into the 2000s, we've got the virtual sort of environment here now, where you have to go into a room somewhere and you can plug into many screens. Now we move up into 2013, and we've got Google, we've got Google Hangouts, whereas you can have this, you can run that on your laptop. Now you can have these virtual meetings. But one of the things you've noticed now, if you were to look, if you were to really sort of stand back for a second, if you were to sort of stand back at that larger picture, right back when we had factories stuck by the riverside, then we brought in steam and then we broke them away from the river. We freed them up, we put them on wheels. Literally, we put them on wheels of steam. Later on in the 80s and the 90s, now we've completely broken free. We can break continents. So the idea of the organization itself is a very fractured and distributed environment. The whole idea of some of these books that I'm just sort of flagging here is that, I mean, first of all, this LinkedIn thing here, this idea that we are networked together, that teamwork is important. People like Adam Smith were talking about this in the 1700s. It's if you sort of read that sort of stuff from now with our own language on it, you see that he knew about how knowledge if you've got a nail, as he put it, if you've got a nail and it's being produced, one person can produce this nail, it's pretty good. If there's a market demand, there's your economic side to this. If there's a market demand, we need to produce more nails, we'll bring in a second person. We now subdivide the roles. I'll stay on the anvil, you stay over by the fire, and now we start producing nail. And it's actually it's better than the first nail, because I become really good at my job and you become really good at your job. Third person comes, bigger market demand. So now what happens is we've divided the labour across 4 or 5 people of this nail. Now this nail is a brilliant nail. Not only is it a brilliant nail, but I can't make this nail. None of us can. Only we can. The knowledge for this nail is distributed across a network of people. Well, this is what Smith was talking about. It's there in his book. Now we sort of try and pick it up and reinvent it as if it's a new idea. But really, one of the key things that they're trying to draw on here is the knowledge of how an organization responds is not stuck in the CEO. It's not stuck up on the top of the business. It's distributed across. So here's the modern resilient. It takes a punch, right? It bounces back. It responds to the environment. And the way it does it is not because something happens to it on the front line and somebody up here makes a decision. What's happened is the power to respond has been pushed back through all these through using technology, through using the idea of the project. We've got all these parts connected up now. Now we can't let them connect up willy-nilly. We need a governance structure to do it. But when the company takes a hit, the response can not only come from here, but it can come from here, or come from here, or come from here. It can come from any part, as long as we've wired it up correctly. And this is my sort of rebadged version, really, of the beehive, where we've got the corporate management here, and then we've got, I use just the same names here as projects and production and so forth. It's the same sort of environment, really. But the point being is there isn't a hierarchy. Trying to draw this so that it doesn't look like there's a hierarchy is not an easy task. What you have to do is try and understand the history to this thing, how it's been built, how it's emerged over time, how it's adapted over time, and how things like technology, in the same way as steam injected some power into moving organizations away from the riverbank, digital technology now is enabling the organization to break completely away from any boundaries and also to be responsive to all sorts of things. So now organizations have to be So for the economics people and the marketing people, you know, we have to have a system where this is responsive to pressure from all sorts of fads and fashions, like carbon. Now we've got to consider something to do with carbon. Now we've got to consider something to do with sustainability. So it's got to reshape itself. It's constantly reshaping itself, and it's using projects to reshape itself. Reshape its main business model and new things that's going to happen in the future. So my sort of, I suppose, take away from this whole little exercise really is that what you've got now is you've got an organisation that's shifted power. Power has gone from the top. It's now come down, or it's coming down, to the front end of the business. And it now provides the organisation with the ability to adapt and respond and to change. And if you wrap that all up, you've got a word like resilience. That's it. I'm done.